Welcome, Craig.
Hi, Wendy.
Let's start out by talking a little bit about yourself and what your background
Okay,
is.
yeah, so I'm Chief Technology and Product Officer at Hubble, and I oversee all the technology teams, the product management teams, and our Hubble product.
Oh, so perfect to talk about innovation. Maybe we should start out by talking about the definition of what innovation is.
Sure, yeah, so it's quite an interesting question. A lot of people talk about innovation, and I think it leads to a lot of assumptions and different conclusions of what that means. From my point of view, innovation, it's any product, process or idea which can bring new or enhance existing value in a company. A lot of people, I think, see innovation as technical enhancements, almost the novelty-like enhancements in some cases, but unless you've got a business model and a sustainable growth model around it, innovation can die. And we see that with great ideas all the time. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, because by definition, innovation isn't about coming up with great ideas and scaling that. It's actually about having lots of ideas, and some of them you'll have to double down on, which will become successes, which are the products we see around us today. I think this is where there is some challenges for organizations, because organizations are generally structured to deliver on existing governance models and predictable plans, but actually by doing so it restricts innovation, because the whole organization isn't geared up to capture new ideas. If you look at some of the great innovative companies, you've got companies that have survived a long time. You see this with Toyota and the likes of GE, who've gone through huge differences in their cultural transformations over time. They're still here today innovating. And I think by definition, what's common across some of these companies isn't necessarily transformation, it's adaptive management. So in a sense, transformation, the need to go through a transformation program by its own definition is reactive. It's a very severe reaction to not being ahead of the curve. So we need to do something drastic. Now, you could argue that some companies recognize a future trend and need to transform in order to recognize it. But adaptive management and management in itself should be inherently actively seeking these ways of working going forward without needing to do transformation in a drastic sense. People are brilliant at generating great ideas, and if you look at from in a lean sense, where you actually go and visit the front line, and actually ideas come from the front line, empowering people in the front line. There's a lot of innovation, a long way away from central management and distributed management. So what you tend to see in companies, unfortunately, is the hierarchical reinforcement of roles and positions. And the cultural challenge then is you've got people all over the company and all over the world, depending on the size of your company, who are engaged and very close to the customer or the customer problem. Unfortunately, for those folks who can see and interact with the customer, where improvements can be made, or actually have generated ideas to improve the value to the customers, the layers that ideas has to go through back to the corporate entity is very difficult. And what you also get is traditional management teachings, teach you that we need a big business case, you need to post it to this person. So the whole process, which somewhat is invisible, is quite intimidating, quite long-winded. And if you're someone in the front line with a great idea, you have to go through all that governance and bureaucracy process and political challenge. Who do you know? Sometimes in companies, then unfortunately your whole system will kill ideas and innovation. And then you end up with innovation incubators, which are theatres of display to show companies that they're innovating. But true innovation and a real cultural transformation means you should be able to encourage ideas to come from everywhere, and have a process which is lightweight and engaging enough to capture those and nurture them through with the support. There's a countless innovations in Silicon Valley where they've pitched great ideas back to the parent company, and the parent company says no, and then they spin off a $1 billion startup. And it's unfortunate, because had they say yes, they could nurture them and support them. Well, I think it comes from leadership. Although, like I said, from the cultural point of view, if you've got a strong hierarchical system in place, which is governed by the big business plans and specific routes of innovation, you'll intimidate most of the workforce to be able to contribute to that. So it really does need to be a leadership drive from the top. And I think what that means is you need to set up, you could call this a form of transformation, but you need to set up initiatives to break down the governance you've got in place. For instance, if someone's got an idea, making it very clear, if they've got an idea, what can they do with that idea, where do they go, who can they speak to, and make sure that they've got a safe space and an environment they can do that. There's nothing more challenged than folks who are particularly measured by efficiencies or utilization to be able to submit ideas. So if you've got an idea and you're working on the front line somewhere, it could be a fantastic idea, but if you've got nowhere to go and your management is not going to support you taking some time out to submit an idea and speak to other folks, it's just not going to happen. ERPs are really powerful. When you look at, in Hubble, we get to work with a lot of ERPs. And what we see and observe across our customer base is that although there are commonalities in what the ERP is used for, there's actually a breadth in the ERPs, of data stored in ERPs, which is enabling some companies, but also gives us the inclination to sort of experiment more and release that information. So, we have customers who store, all the understandably traditional ERP data sets, but then that's combined with IoT data and all these other things, which make it very interesting and powerful. The ERP is a knowledge source for the entire organization. And it goes back to a constraint, actually. ERPs are somewhat a constraint today, not because of the design of the ERP, it's the operational exclusivity to finance. So you've got all this data in the ERP, which is absolute gold, yet it's usually restricted to the finance department in a lot of cases. Now, if you can release key information from that system and distribute it across other functions, you don't have to do all transactions and everything, but you could extract meaningful conclusions or meaningful questions from the ERP and distribute it to others who could really respond to that information or utilize it in the generation of ideas and growth. There's so much knowledge in there and opportunity, which is trapped essentially unless you can release it. The more frequent that can be released and distributed to the organization as a whole, a meaningful way, so not necessarily transaction level, but conclusive KPI data and so forth, you could empower people across the organization to make much more intelligent decisions on a much more frequent basis.
Craig, thank you so much for your time today. This conversation has been so interesting, and look forward to seeing what innovation in 2018 is going to look like.
Yeah, exciting times. Thanks, Wendy.